Welcome to MacGyver's Workshop, where you never know what we're going to be working on next. If you're not too careful, you just might learn something. Hi there, and welcome to MacGyver's Workshop, where you never know what we're going to be working on next, and if you're not too careful, you just might learn something. So today what we're working on is a Rochester Quadrajet 4-barrel carburetor off of a 1982 Chevrolet C10 pickup with either a 305 or a 350. We're not sure. The emission sticker said it came with a 305, but the kid who owns it says the guy he bought it off of said that it was swapped out with a 350. Okay, who knows? I'll look at the numbers on the block and see if I can ID it, but who knows? But anyway, so problem is he bought the truck and drove it for about a month. He said it did fine, and then all of a sudden it kind of started rapidly going downhill over a period of, I guess, a week or so, to the point where it wouldn't even start. I went and picked it up and brought it over here, took the carburetor off. Well, before I took the carburetor off, I did some diagnosis on it, and there was no fuel in the carburetor. So the kid said he'd already put a brand new fuel pump on it, and you could see that it was brand new. And took the line off, cranked it up, and moving plenty of fuel, plenty of volume. So there is something in this carburetor that is causing us some grief. Not allowing the fuel to get in there, whether it be a clogged filter or stuck needle in seat or something like that, who knows, or some trash in the needle in seat. We're going to get cracking here and tear into it. Now, to work on one of these, there's some basic tools that you're going to need. You'll need straight tip screwdriver, Phillips head screwdriver, and this particular carburetor, which is 82, and probably most of your later 82 and later carburetors, you'll need a T25 Torx, as all the screws in this are mostly T25 Torx, so you'll need that to get them out. Then you'll also need a very fine pin punch. That I'm using this as an example, but it's not small enough. So I'm just going to use an old sacrificial Allen wrench. That's the right size. There's a little roll pin on the accelerator pump lever here we got to tap through to get off before we can get the top of the carburetor off. First thing we'd want to do is check our fuel filter. The kid said he checked it and it looked clear. I kind of like to see for myself. So, of course, obviously I'd already loosened that up. It's just got a screen type on there. It's clear. No problem there. So whatever problem we got, it's deeper in the carburetor. And by the way, to get this off, you're going to need you a 1-inch wrench. Crescent wrench always handy. Ball peen, little baby ball peen hammer to tap on your roll pins to get them out. And in this case, a 1/8-inch drill bit to drill out this little rivet right here. Normally that rivet would be in there from the factory to prevent you from having to adjust the choke. And what this is this is an electric choke, and it has a little heating element built into it with a bimetallic spring that reacts to temperature. And when you first start the engine cold, the spring's real tight and holds this choke butterfly essentially closed, essentially choking the engine to make it run richer and pull more fuel. And then as the engine is running for a while and this little heating element heats that spring up, it relaxes, and then it will gradually open the choke butterfly back up. So, most of the time we drill these out and just put a screw in there, because you always want to be able to tweak and adjust that, just to get the best drivability in the cold weather out of it. Today, your hardly likely to find one of these that's unmolested, but back in the day, these things came with caps pressed in to the idle mixture screws, and because they didn't want you to tamper with them, and that was for emissions. And the problem with that is that they had them set so lean, you know, the car run like crap. So even to the point where after they sold the car, if you brought it back to the dealer under warranty, they would cut those caps out of there to where you could adjust these idle mixture screws. And what that does is that determines how much fuel goes in the engine when the throttle is closed completely and the engine's idling. Let's get started. We're going to tear this thing down. We're going to have to take, and as I was telling you, we're going to have to pop this little roll pin out here. I'll show you here. And it's what holds this little lever for the accelerator pump in there. And you just have to punch it through and leave yourself enough room to get a screwdriver or something in there to put it back when you're going back together with it. Once you knock this roll pin through far enough, then this little lever will pop out. And that will help you or allow you to get the top of the carburetor off. See if that was enough, shall we? Probably could have used an even smaller Allen wrench there. There we go. That can come off of there. And then I'll have to remove this choke pull off and undo this linkage here. I guess I'll take this little air cleaner stud out of here. And then I can take the top of the carburetor off and we can get an idea, get a look down in here and see what's going on. So I'm going to go ahead and start working on that, and then I'll relocate the camera so you can see what I see when I pull the top of this carburetor off. And we take that like so. Take our T25 Torx and get our choke pull off of here. So we can disconnect all those linkages that are going to hold us up from getting this top plate off of here. What the choke pull off does is, if you just relied on this to hold the choke closed, it would choke the engine too much and then it would flood out. So what this does is this has enough spring tension on it to hold that choke closed. And as soon as the engine starts up, this choke pull off does exactly what it says. It pulls off that choke butterfly just a little bit to let some more air in there. And it's kind of like a happy medium, if you will, and to allow the motor to run a lot smoother. And that makes for better cold weather drivability. So now all I got to do now, let's see, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and then there's 12 and 13. Actually, those are slightly smaller down in here. Yep, it's T20. Almost steered you wrong, didn't I? There's two little tiny ones down in here in what's called the booster. I can get that to stay open. There's a little tiny screw here and over here that you got to get out before the top of this carburetor will come off. That's partially why you don't want to ever do one of these on the car, because these things are very prone to falling down through the carburetor if you're not careful. And that falls down into the intake, and you start the motor up, then that'd make for a bad day. So get all these out of here. I usually kind of work from the center, work my way out. And you have to remember all this stuff's aluminum, cast aluminum, so especially when you're going back together with these things, you don't want to be too ham-fisted with them and tighten everything too much, because you'll strip these tiny threads out real easy. Alright, so let me get these, take all these screws out and put them aside, and I'm going to reposition the camera and get a kind of closer in view so you can see better what we're messing with here. Now that we've got all our screws off of here, we've got our choke linkage off, we've got our accelerator pump linkage, choke pull off. Pretty much the top is ready to come off. This would be what they refer to as the air horn, or the top most of the three layers of this carburetor. You've got the air horn, you've got the main body, and then you've got the throttle body or throttle plate or base plate. Now, most of the time, this air horn will be stuck down because of the gasket, over however many years this thing's been together. Now, on a Quadrajet, or any carburetor for that matter, you don't want to go poking around with a screwdriver and digging in between, the two halves or two sections of the housing, because you could do some damage and create a vacuum leak there, or a gasoline leak. But there is a little spot on this carburetor where you can go back here and just put your screwdriver in there and then just twist, and it'll break that stiction between the air horn and the gasket material, and allow you to get this air horn off of here. And this, which I failed to mention earlier, is a little spring that's in here, and what that just does is that keeps that fuel filter pressed against the in place here. So, and we will take this and lift this bad boy off of here. Now you're going to have some linkages and things like that, and metering rods and all kind of stuff trying to come up out of there at the same time. Ideally, if you can, you want the gasket to come up with this top section of the carburetor. That tends to make this disassembly a whole lot easier. And ideally, you want the gasket to come off in one piece without it peeling off and leaving a bunch of gook on there that you have to try and clean off. But if not, that's okay too. And you'll lift it up and you'll see all your metering rods. These are the secondary metering rods off of the 4-barrel part of the carburetor. And then these here are air emulsion tubes. Help make for a better air fuel mixture by kind of pre-mixing it with air before it gets sucked down into the engine. Now you want to be careful with this, and you don't want to lay this down on these rods and bend them, or these tubes. So you always want to lay this thing down upside down like that. And then we can work our gasket off here. And what you have, this is your accelerator pump, and that has a hefty spring behind it, so we're gonna take that off and get that out of there. And then I'm gonna show you something that's pretty interesting. All right, this is like a little rubber seal. This is the accelerator pump piston, and when you press on the gas, this piston gets pushed down and gives a little extra squirt of fuel to help the engine keep it from stumbling. And as I pulled it out, you could see that there's this little piece came off. So yeah, this carburetor needed to be rebuilt. What that could do is that would make for a stumble when you step on the gas, or hesitation, because it wouldn't be shooting enough fuel in there. Now this little bit right here, okay, is called a power piston, and I noticed when I pulled the top of the carburetor off that it popped right on out of there. That's not necessarily uncommon, but it shouldn't do that. It should stay down in there. And these are like your primary metering rods, and these other ones were the secondaries. But this piston should be able to move up and down smoothly with no issues. And this is what affects your part throttle operation. So when you're cruising down the road holding 50, 55 miles an hour, this little piston here will move up and down depending, and either richen or lean out the mixture a little bit for the best drivability. Then this is just a plate that holds your float and your needle and seat down in there. And we'll see what we're getting into here. I'm really interested to know why we weren't able to get any fuel into this carburetor, because there was plenty of it right here, right at the inlet coming from that fuel pump. So my guess is there's a piece of trash stuck in this needle and seat. So we'll see. And first, I want to get, there's a little spring here. That's got to come out. That's for the power piston. Okay. And then there's another spring here. And that's the return spring for the accelerator pump. And get that over there. And somewhere down in there, there's a little check ball too that's going to fall out of here. So let's lift this float out of here, and we'll see. That's our float, and that is actually this float's bad. There, see a little bit of damage right there. So this float and soak up fuel and won't float no more. But the problem with that theory is if that were the case, then the engine would constantly be flooding itself out. So while we will need to buy a float, we have not found our smoking gun, if you will. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay out a rag here to catch my gas that's going to come pouring out of here. And I tried to drain it as best I could, but you never get it all. So I'm going to just pour this here. And that little check ball I was talking about is actually captive under a little screw right here. So I don't have to worry about losing that check ball. And so let's see what's going on here. And let's pull this little, pull that needle out of there and see if we can find out what's going on and why I won't let no fuel in the carburetor, huh? Well, needle looks good. I don't see any issues there. Let's take we'll take the seat out, which is this little brass looking piece right here. Okay. All right, so I'm going to need me a really good, large, straight tip screwdriver to get into this slotted head of this seat here. We'll take that out. I'm still not seeing a smoking gun here. I was expecting maybe to find a piece of trash in here or something. There's also a little washer or gasket, if you want to call it that, on here. I'm not seeing any trash in there. But what I do see is that little chunk that came off of that float that goes right there. So what we'll do for tonight is we'll just break this thing down and put it in the dip to soak, and it'll come out all nice and spiffy clean. And then we'll clean out all our passages and all that sort of good stuff, and go from there, go back together with it, and try and figure out why this thing wasn't letting any fuel in. That's kind of perplexing, really. So the float didn't appear to be stuck in the raised position, which could have, you know, kept that needle closed and prevent any fuel from getting in there, but I didn't see that either. So, you know, this is a weird one. So, anywho, the next thing we'll want to do, toss all these bits and bobs over here. We'll go ahead and we'll work our way from top to bottom, and we'll get our choke housing off of here. But in order to do that, these two screws are easy enough, but we're going to have to drill this rivet out. And for that, we'll use our drill bit. And we'll go back with a screw. We're not so much worried about the EPA on this. Not on an 82 Chevy with about 1 billion miles on it. So you always want to save. You always want to save those little ears, though. Sometimes they're hard to come by. And we use our Phillips. Get these other guys out of here. I'm going to hold this choke housing in place and show you there's actually an index on the carburetor casting here that you can kind of use to make a mark and remember, you know, what setting works best for you during the summer and which one works best during the winter. And let me get that to you right there. Oops. Let's see how we can do this here. There's that right there. It's got little marks, little notches on it, and you can put put you a mark on your housing here, and you know, you can adjust this looser or tighter, and through experimentation you'll find what works best for you. So there's that little bimetallic spring I was telling you about. It's basically heat sensitive. When it's cold it's tight, and then it relaxes and loosens up when it gets hot. But then in order to get this this choke housing off of here so we can get this thing apart all the way and get it good and clean, we will need to take this screw out of here, and that will be a T25, I believe. Not sure if I have to take that center one out or not. It's been a while since I rebuilt one of these. I don't think so. I think that can stay in there. Alright. Get that out of there, out of the way. And then you got all this little nitnoid stuff here. And knowing where all that goes comes with experience. So when we go to put it back together, I'll show you where it goes. This little lever right here is what prevents your four barrels from opening up when the engine's cold and the choke's still on. That's what that's for. And so we're all clear there. This has a little linkage here in there. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take our primary jets out of here, and then we'll get that little screw out of there that holds that check ball and probably a spring in there for the accelerator pump, and get it ready to go in the dip. And basically what it is, a dip is like a strong chemical that'll, this thing will soak in, and we'll let it soak in there overnight, and it'll really get in there, all the little nooks and crannies and passages, and clean and get that carburetor nice and clean. Because when they don't run right, it's usually because they've got some gook built up in them, or maybe a piece of trash got in there, something like that. A nice pair of tweezers is always handy too. There we go. That just holds that, check ball down in there and keeps it from going anywhere. Yeah, see, this one don't have a spring on it. There's your little metal check ball, like a little BB. Alright, then we'll get our primary jets out of here. What these jets are just basically little orifices, or nozzles, if you will, kind of, sort of. And those nozzles and those metering rods here work together, okay, and these metering rods go down into these jets and regulate the amount of fuel that can get into the engine. And you know, ideally you want it to be just right. And of course, you know, jets are clear. You know, I've seen a lot worse. You know, I've seen these carburetors just have all kind of trash in here. This is what would be considered the fuel bowl. That's where all your fuel is. And you know, this one's not too dirty, so that's a good thing, but I'm still puzzled as to why we weren't able to get any fuel in there, because I'm not finding a clog or a restriction or anything like that. So that is very interesting. But anyway, let's move on and let's get our throttle plate off of here, and we'll get into something that I'll show you. You know, by 1982, I think they probably got this fixed, but there for the ever longest, it was a pretty good problem. Now, see, these screws were pretty loose, so we'll make sure they're good and tight when we put them back in there. Usually, this one doesn't stick. Yep, yeah, see, this one's good. See, what happens is, back in the day, okay, right here and here, okay, these are capped off and sealed, but they would always leak and leak fuel. So you come out in the morning and go to start your car up, and you'd have to crank and crank and crank and crank until the fuel pump, you know, filled the bowl back up with enough fuel to let the engine start. So, yeah, this one's, yeah, this gasket's in pretty bad shape. So, it's just falling apart. So we're going to get all that sorted. So this is all these bits and bobs here are ready to go into the dip. So, and here's another thing that I see that's not really good on this. When the this carburetor is way out of adjustment, when you open up the throttle, this is what's called a mechanical secondary carburetor. So when you open this up all the way, all right, these butterflies should be at 90 degrees, and you can tell that they're not. They should be like that. So that's going to lose a wee bit of performance right there. And there's you know, different little levers and arms you can bend here to make sure that when all is said and done, that this thing, those secondaries, you know, open up to exactly 90 degrees. So anyway, all right, so what I've done is I've poured this into a larger container so I could have room to get the whole housing down in there, assembly down in there. One other thing I should mention that I neglected to mention, this one's not too bad, but you always want to check the throttle shaft bushings for excessive free play, because in some cases, if the motor's real finicky, you know, if the throttle shaft bushings are worn out, then you could get a vacuum leak there, and that could make the you know, prevent the engine from running as smoothly as it could, assuming it didn't have that vacuum leak. Now, this one's not too bad. My guess is at some point this was probably a reman carburetor. I don't know, but for whatever reason, I don't know how many miles is on the truck, and supposedly that's not the original engine. So I'm really surprised that for an 82 that these throttle bushings look that good. So that's a good thing though, because the alternative is you have to take these shafts out, take the butterflies out, and you order a special kit that has new bushings that go here and here, and there's a special tool, a reamer, that goes in there and hogs that hole out, and then you press that bushing in there, and then your shaft fits in there nice and tight with no leaks. So, but thankfully, doesn't seem like we're going to have to worry about that too much with this one. So that's it for this part of the video. Stay tuned for part 2 when we come back, and we'll have everything all cleaned up. We'll have us a new float, and we've already got our gasket kit, our rebuild kit. Float doesn't come with the kit. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe if you like the stuff that you see, and feel free to post in the comments below. We welcome all the comments. Catch me doing something not right and you're smarter than I am, which is probably a lot of people out there are smarter than I am. Don't be afraid to call me out on it. I won't take it personal. I like to learn something new every day. And also, if you want to, you could also email me at MacGyversWorkshop@gmail.com. And you can check our website at www.MacGyversWorkshop.net. We're trying to get that up and going and get some interesting content on there. So, check that out there and see what we post, and we'll talk at you next time. See you in part 2.